I remember the first time I really noticed it, that gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach, that restless buzzing at the edge of every quiet moment. It wasn't like the kind of anxiety you get when something concrete is wrong, like a looming deadline or a tense conversation you have to face. No, this was different. I could be sitting in my favorite chair, a cup of tea warm in my hands, a calm afternoon unfolding right outside my window, and still, my mind would spiral. A silent alarm flashing inside me, even though, on the surface, everything was perfectly fine. That feeling was confusing. Why would my body and mind insist something was wrong when nothing really was? It felt unfair, like a cruel trick played on me by my own brain. I'd done what I thought was right, worked hard, stayed organized, kept my life on track, and yet, inside, there was always this uneasy feeling, as if the piece I was trying to grasp kept slipping just beyond my fingers. I wasn't alone in this. I started talking quietly with friends, my family, even strangers who seemed to carry that same invisible weight. And they all told me the same thing. I don't know why I'm so anxious all the time. There's nothing wrong, but I just can't calm down. It struck me that this wasn't a problem with the world outside. It was something happening deep within, some quiet, hidden mechanism in our minds that kept us trapped in that state of alert, like a switch that got stuck in the on position. The thing is, this isn't about big dramatic crises or clear threats. It's the opposite. It's about how, even in moments when life should feel peaceful, our nervous system refuses to settle. I came to realize that this constant tension was something learned, something silently reinforced without us even knowing. Somewhere along the way, I, and many others, picked up patterns of thinking and reacting that unknowingly fed this restlessness. I became obsessed with figuring out what was happening inside me. What were these patterns? How did they start? And most importantly, how could I stop living with that low hum of anxiety that refused to fade? The answers weren't in quick fixes or surface-level tricks. Instead, they lay in uncovering the subtle, often invisible mistakes in how I was interpreting my own inner world. Maybe you felt this too, the strange urge to interpret stillness as a warning, the need to control every little thing so that the chaos inside doesn't explode, the stubborn refusal to even touch those uncomfortable feelings because they feel unsafe, or the endless quest for some kind of absolute security that, deep down, you know you can never truly have. These are the quiet enemies, the psychological traps that keep your nervous system stuck in overdrive even when the coast looks clear. And here's the thing that blew my mind. No one really talks about these. We're told to just relax or don't worry. But that's like telling someone drowning to just stop struggling. It doesn't address what's beneath. So I decided to look deeper, not just into what these patterns are, but why our brains fall into them again and again. What makes these mental errors so persistent? What makes them feel like the only way to survive, even when they're actually keeping us stuck? I won't pretend I have all the answers yet. But what I've learned so far is that this struggle isn't a sign of weakness or failure. It's a sign of how complex and sensitive our systems are, constantly trying to protect us in ways that can sometimes backfire. Understanding this was the first real step toward transforming that restless energy into something new. I want to invite you to come with me on this journey, not as someone broken who needs fixing, but as someone brave enough to face the invisible traps we all deal with. This isn't about eliminating emotions or pretending anxiety will vanish overnight. It's about learning how to relate differently to those feelings so they no longer control us. We're going to explore 6 psychological mistakes I uncovered, patterns that, if unchallenged, keep our minds locked in a loop of tension and alertness. But more than just naming them, we'll uncover how these errors emerge quietly and why they're so hard to shake. And somewhere within that understanding lies the possibility of change, not quick fixes, but a real transformation. This is a story about reclaiming calm in a world that often tells us to race faster, about finding safety inside when the outside feels uncertain. If you've ever felt that invisible weight pressing you down when everything seems fine, you're not alone. Together, we'll shine a light on what's really happening and take the first step toward moving beyond the trap. Tell me, as we start this journey, which part of your experience feels the heaviest today? Which silent mistake do you feel is holding the reins tight inside you? I'm here, walking this path with you, and I promise, something new is possible. Late one evening, I found myself trapped in a cycle of thoughts that felt like a maze with no exit. The quiet of my room should have cocooned me in stillness, yet a storm raged inside. It wasn't fueled by outside events. Instead, my mind clung to subtle misinterpretations, framing mere calm as a signal that danger lurked nearby. This mental error had transformed peace into a dubious guest, something to suspect rather than embrace. I recall sitting on the edge of my bed, heart fluttering for no apparent cause, questioning why tranquility seemed to rattle me instead of soothe me. In that moment, a profound realization emerged. My psyche had developed a habit of mistrusting serenity. Instead of savoring silence, I perceived it as an alarm bell. This corrupted appraisal subtly programmed my fight-or-flight response to stay active when it should have been at rest. What astonished me most was how this conditioning crept in unnoticed over time. Like a faint whisper in the background, it embedded the idea that safety equates to suspicion. Each elapsed moment without tension was no longer a refuge, but a red flag. Over the years, this gave rise to an almost compulsive instinct to scan for threats in places where none existed. It became a reflex, one that rewired my expectations about how life should feel. Around this same period, a close friend shared a story that echoed my experience yet illuminated a different facet. She described her continual urge to micromanage every hour of her day, convinced that without strict control, chaos would engulf her world. Her relentless quest for order masked a desperation anchored in fear that letting go would unleash calamity. What struck me was how our minds, although unique in their expressions, often operated through similar survival schemes, grasping too tightly at constructs meant to guarantee stability. Through countless conversations and silent moments of reflection, I began tracing the roots of this compulsion. It stemmed from an implicit belief that relinquishing control equals abandonment, vulnerability, and ultimately, harm. In my friend's case, life's unpredictability was framed as a threat, demanding constant intervention. I realized that this mentality, although intuitive, sowed seeds of endurance without ease, perpetuating heightened tension beneath the surface of everyday existence. This revelation reframed how I looked at attempts to avoid discomfort. I saw how dodging unpleasant feelings became a survival tactic, a shield against exposing raw textures of pain, insecurity, or frustration. Yet shielding too fiercely paradoxically deepened inner turmoil. Imagine a river constricted by dams and levees. The water's force intensifies behind barriers, building pressure that can only escape in destructive bursts. I came to understand emotional avoidance worked much like this. In avoiding the tide's ebb and flow, we inadvertently trap energy that yearns for release. I remember one particularly vivid afternoon when I faced a wave of sadness that I initially fought to suppress. I busied myself with chores, called friends, and even went for a run, all to shun the unease crawling beneath my ribs. But eventually, exhaustion claimed me, and in a rare moment of honesty, I surrendered. Sitting quietly, I let tears fall freely for what felt like the first time in months. The sensation was a strange blend of vulnerability and relief, like exhaling after holding my breath too long. That moment cracked open a new door, demonstrating that embracing discomfort paradoxically tempered the anxiety I feared. Confronted by this truth, I also questioned the myth of absolute security that many of us chase relentlessly. I remember imagining life as a tightrope walk, where every step was taken with trembling care to evade the abyss below. The yearning for perfect safety controlled our pace, forcing us to miss the thrill of the balance itself. It dawned on me that no matter how tightly we clutch life's railings, uncertainty will always lurk beneath. That's the challenge and the beauty of being alive. One night, overwhelmed by a ceaseless need to shield myself from uncertainty, I decided to write a letter addressed to my future self. I scribbled words that acknowledged the futility of seeking flawless safety and instead celebrated the courage to face the unknown. That exercise sparked a shift within me, a seed of acceptance that ripened over weeks. I began to loosen the grip, permitting life to surprise me with its messy, unpredictable moments. The paradox was unmistakable. Releasing control did not invite disaster. It invited genuine presence. This journey revealed how the mind sometimes creates false barricades intended to defend, yet they imprison us instead. Each mental quirk I uncovered wove a story of protection gone awry. Yet within those stories lay invitations to rewrite the script, forging paths toward resilience not built on resistance, but on acceptance. As I share this, I sense you might recognize one or more of these silent drivers within yourself. Maybe it's the tendency to mistrust quietness, or the hunger to orchestrate every unfoldment, the recoil from emotional unease, or the endless pursuit of security. These fragments shape how you navigate your internal landscape, influencing what feels safe or threatening. Now, consider how this applies when you face moments of stillness. Can you notice if a subtle unease creeps upon arrival? Do you find yourself tightening your mental grip, as though bracing for impact in a calm room? If so, know that you're witnessing not a malfunction in you, but a deeply ingrained script written long ago. What comes next is an exploration, how we might gently challenge these ingrained narratives and craft responses that foster peace instead of distrust. I remember a particular morning when I woke up earlier than usual, pulled the curtains aside, and was greeted by the soft glow of dawn breaking over the horizon. Normally, such moments filled me with a quiet appreciation for life's subtle beauties. Instead, I found myself caught in a strange restlessness, as if the stillness itself was itching beneath my skin. It was as though my awareness was hyper-alert to possibilities that didn't exist, threats disguised in the gentlest of sunrises. At that moment, I realized the way I related to calmness was skewed. Rather than an invitation to relax, serenity had become an environment that my nerves viewed suspiciously. My inner alarm system insisted on remaining vigilant, warning me that peace might be precarious, fragile, or fleeting. Over time, this subtle mistrust had transformed quiet moments into an ongoing challenge to endure. What I hadn't seen before was how I'd taken on a certain mindset, one that equated uncertainty with danger in such a way that prevention became a compulsion. It wasn't just the act of trying to control what's possible, but a persistent mental rehearsal of worst-case scenarios. I would imagine tiny missteps turning into disasters, constantly scripting dramas in my imagination that never actually unfolded. The problem wasn't external. It was my brain's elaborate game of what if, trapping me in a feedback loop of imagined hazards. One afternoon stands out vividly. I was discussing upcoming plans with a close friend. She had recently started practicing a hobby that involved improvisational theater, and found it liberating rather than terrifying. She laughed as she recounted her initial fears of messing up publicly, but explained how surrendering to uncertainty liberated her creativity. Hearing her, I felt an invisible barrier inside me, a wall built from years of trying to anticipate every possible outcome. It was a stark contrast. She danced with unpredictability. I fought it like an enemy. Later that evening, restless and unable to settle, I tried jotting down what I feared most about uncertainty. My list spiraled. Fear of loss, humiliation, failure, abandonment, each word heavier than the last. But then, beneath the weight, another insight surfaced. These fears, while intense, were shadows I projected onto uncertain moments. My mind was navigating not the present, but a dense fog of imagined perils. Those stories flooded my nervous system with adrenaline, even when reality offered no real threat. Another revealing experience came during a weekend hike. I was walking along a narrow trail with a group of friends when suddenly the path we'd planned was blocked by a landslide. Instead of feeling frustrated or scared, some members laughed at the unexpected detour. They adjusted our route, reminding me that the unknown could sometimes lead to fresh, even better experiences. I noticed how my first impulse was to tense up, bracing against the unexpected, but watching their ease made me question the rigid grasp I had on how things should be. That hike was a living metaphor for how I had been treating uncertainty. Clinging to strict expectations was like trying to keep the trail clear with my bare hands, when in reality, nature's flow constantly reshapes the terrain. The lesson was profound. Resisting change wasn't protecting me. It was exhausting, isolating, and ultimately futile. In time, I began dialoguing with these mental scripts. What if uncertainty isn't the enemy it seems? What if the tension I feel comes from trying to fight what naturally shifts? These questions nudged a slow but steady unraveling. Instead of launching into a spiral of catastrophic projections, I started practicing curiosity, asking what might really happen, instead of guessing what could go wrong. One night, alone with a cup of chamomile tea, I dared to imagine uncertainty as a possibility rather than a threat. I pictured stepping onto a stage without a script and allowing the performance to unfold in genuine spontaneity. The idea was terrifying and exhilarating at once. I felt my chest rise and fall with a new rhythm, less like a battle drum and more like a gentle pulse. For a fleeting moment, I glimpsed what it might feel like to breathe through change instead of fighting it. These awakenings didn't arrive all at once. Each was a thread weaving a tapestry of newfound resilience that didn't rely on ironclad control or the false promise of predictability. Instead, it began with a shift in relationship to the unknown, a willingness to experience discomfort without being consumed by it. Now, consider how you might meet moments where plans abruptly veer off course, or when you find yourself spinning worst-case scenarios. Could you catch yourself clenching against the natural flow of change? Imagine meeting those moments with a gentle awareness that notices fear without letting it take the wheel. It's a small but profound recalibration, one that turns tension into invitation, rigidity into openness. Through these experiences, I saw how embracing the fluidity of life's unpredictability can transform how tension presents itself inside us. It's not about ignoring worry or pretending it doesn't surface, but about shifting from a reactive posture to one that invites exploration, even amid chaos. When I practice this, the nervous system starts to recognize that in the absence of real danger, tension no longer needs to be a constant companion. By extending kindness toward the unknown, we discover an inner landscape where peace and uncertainty coexist, not as enemies, but as dance partners guiding us toward richer, fuller presence. There was a chilly autumn evening when I found myself wandering through a dimly lit park after a long day. The faint rustling of leaves beneath my feet mingled with distant city sounds, creating a soundtrack both soothing and unsettling. Without warning, a wave of unease crept over me, not from any external threat, but from an internal impulse to constantly monitor and adjust my surroundings. I realized how deeply ingrained the habit of attempting to manage every detail was, as though my mind believed that perfect control was the antidote to discomfort. The craving to oversee every detail, to orchestrate outcomes like a conductor with a symphony, had become an invisible leash I wore willingly. I noticed how this persistent need to fix, plan, or predict squeezed spontaneity out of my life, leaving moments hollow and rehearsed. Instead of experiencing the fluid rhythm of daily living, I was stuck in an exhausting cycle of mental micromanagement. It was as if I was trying to tweak the dials on an old radio, but no matter how much I adjusted, the static of tension never fully faded. Unexpectedly, a stranger broke the spell. A woman seated on a nearby bench noticed my restlessness and invited me to share the bench without words, her calm presence offering a silent invitation to pause. As minutes passed, I found myself softening, the pressure in my chest loosening. Her quiet confidence seemed to teach me something profound, that sometimes allowing things to unfold naturally can create space for peace to take root. Reflecting on that moment, I grasped how my relentless quest for control was fueled by a silent belief that anything unmastered would spin out of reach. I thought I was reflexively protecting myself, but in reality, I was constructing walls that distanced me from life's unpredictable beauty. I'd been so focused on steering every turn that I missed the surprise of unexpected joy that often comes when we loosen our grip. The next day, I experimented with some subtle shifts. During a routine meeting, when I felt the impulse to anticipate every objection and plan my defense, I instead chose to listen intently, embracing the pauses without rushing to fill them. It was unsettling at first, like stepping onto thin ice, but gradually, I noticed how this openness invited richer exchanges. The tension that used to tighten my shoulders began to dissolve halfway through the conversation. That small act reminded me how surrendering plans can sometimes foster connection rather than chaos. Not long after, I ventured into cooking without a recipe, something I used to avoid, fearful of messing up. I experimented boldly with ingredients, sometimes missing the mark, but also discovering unexpected flavors. It was messy and imperfect, yet each stumble was a lesson wrapped in laughter and curiosity. This playful willingness to embrace uncertainty sparked a newfound tenderness toward myself. I understood that mistakes don't signal failure, but rather map flashes of the unpolished, genuine self. During a quiet morning run, I caught myself obsessing over potential obstacles throughout the day. Focusing on each what if felt like carrying a backpack stuffed with stones, weighing me down. At a crossroads, I stopped, took a breath, and deliberately dropped the metaphorical load. In that release, I sensed a remarkable lightness, not negating challenges, but freeing energy to meet them with freshness, not dread. It was a liberation from the silent mandate to control outcomes at all costs. One fleeting conversation with a colleague illuminated this even further. She confessed to embracing ambiguity at work, admitting that sometimes the best ideas come when structure loosens and minds flow freely. Her words resonated deeply. I realized that by rigidly tightening the reins, I had been boxing myself into narrow corridors when doors to innovation and joy beckoned just beyond. Another essential revelation arrived unexpectedly during a visit to an art exhibit. Faced with abstract paintings that challenged form and definition, I initially felt unsettled, yearning for clear shapes and narratives. Yet, standing there, I surrendered to the ambiguity, letting colors and strokes wash over me without forcing meaning. That experience revealed an invitation to engage life with curiosity instead of judgment, to trust that not everything requires immediate comprehension or control. Now, I invite you to consider moments when your mind spins webs of what-ifs, when you seize the urge to manage timelines, outcomes, or feelings with ironclad precision. What happens if you allow even a crack for unpredictability, embracing the flow with softer hands? Imagine how liberation might arise when plans loosen and devotion to control gently fades. The possibility for depth, creativity, and joy await when we step away from mental tightropes and find steadiness in presence. Through these encounters, I learned that relinquishing the tight clasp of control is not surrender to chaos. It is rather an act of profound trust. Trust in yourself, your resilience, and life's capacity to unfold with its own wisdom. Letting go does not mean falling apart. It means opening to experience in fuller hues, unfiltered and alive. One evening, as twilight melted into night, I sat outside watching the stars blink awake in a velvet sky. With each breath, the cool air brushed against my skin like a gentle reminder of life's ebb and flow. I noticed a subtle tension lingering beneath my calm exterior, not the obvious kind, but a quiet wariness that whispered unsettling doubts. It occurred to me then that, even when life seemed steady, my mind could still be caught in the grip of an unyielding desire for absolute certainty, an illusion I had chased for years. I recall a vivid conversation with my mentor, a woman breathing wisdom as if from the very earth beneath us. She told me about an ancient tree standing on the edge of a cliff, its roots clinging fiercely to stone, resisting the wind that threatened to uproot it. That tree looks strong, she said softly, but true strength lies in bending with the storm, not resisting it. Her words planted a seed I hadn't expected. Could it be that my relentless search for security was less about protection and more about resisting inevitable change? A few days later, during a rainstorm that drenched the city, I witnessed a child gleefully chasing puddles, unbothered by the drenched clothes or the slippery ground. His laughter cut through the grayness like a spark of wild joy. In that instant, I envied his freedom, a freedom that couldn't exist without embracing uncertainty. The child embodied a trust in life's rhythms, unafraid to get soaked or slip, because in his world, exploration outweighed fear. Reflecting on the tight grip I'd held over my own life, I realized how much energy I expended attempting to eliminate every possibility of discomfort. I had constructed an impenetrable fortress of what-ifs around myself, barricades built from endless mental rehearsals designed to forecast every outcome. But this fortress, although intended as a refuge, had become my prison, stifling spontaneity, muzzling courage, and draining vitality. One morning, while sipping coffee at a bustling cafe, I noticed a woman across the room engaged in conversation. She described how she'd recently faced a professional crossroads. Instead of clutching rigid expectations, she chose to surrender to uncertainties, allowing space for surprises. It wasn't easy, she confessed, but surrender opened doors I didn't even know existed. Her story sparked a ripple of hope within me. Might relinquishing the illusion of complete control reveal pathways to growth previously hidden by fear? Emboldened, I experimented with releasing some of my tightly held expectations. During a weekend trip, when travel disruptions threatened to derail plans, I caught tension building in my chest. Instead of succumbing to frustration, I paused and allowed the day to unfold unscripted. Unexpected detours led to serendipitous encounters, a quiet bookshop, a local cafe buzzing with stories, strangers who soon felt like old friends. Each moment marked a gentle erosion of control's grip, replaced by curious openness. This experience uncovered layers I hadn't anticipated. Letting go didn't imply recklessness. It invited confidence in navigating life's currents without incessant grasping. The surrender wasn't a surrender to chaos, but an embrace of life's fluidity, an acceptance that certainty is a mirage gleaming on the horizon. In a late-night journal entry, I wrote about how striving for perfect safety had subtly eroded my ability to tolerate vulnerability. Auditory memories of childhood echoed, a voice reminding me that mistakes carried shame, that being wrong was dangerous. These early imprints had imprinted a false narrative, one where the pursuit of control masked a fear of exposure. Confronting these beliefs demanded courage. I began speaking aloud affirmations that honored imperfection. I am safe amidst shifts. Change does not diminish my worth. Each repetition chipped away layers of armor while nurturing tender strength beneath. During a solitary walk in a sun-dappled forest, I watched leaves twist and fall without resistance. Each leaf released its hold at the perfect moment, descending gracefully, yielding to gravity's gentle call. Witnessing this simple, natural surrender within such complexity felt like a metaphor for my own path, learning when to loosen my grip and trust rhythm's flow. Now, consider your own tendencies. When faced with uncertainty's edge, when your mind races to secure a foothold, what might happen if you stepped back and observed rather than reacted? Imagine breathing in the possibility that your needs could be met without firm holds, that safety exists not only in structure, but in fluid acceptance. You might discover, as I did, that loosening control reveals hidden spaces of creativity, resilience, and peace. These spaces, though quiet and unassuming, harbor a dynamic strength born from flexibility, readiness, and presence. Embracing them doesn't erase fear, but softens its sharp edges, creating room for life's full palette to color your experience. As the seasons shift outside my window, I sense that this dance, between holding and releasing, defines the mature rhythm of human growth. It invites us to welcome unpredictability as a companion, not a foe. And in doing so, to step from the shadows of resistance into a light woven from trust and courage. One autumn afternoon, while wandering through a bustling farmer's market, I noticed a small boy chasing bubbles with unabated joy. Each bubble shimmered iridescent in the sunlight, drifting unpredictably before popping unexpectedly. His laughter was pure and unguarded as he darted after those fragile spheres, fully immersed in the unpredictable dance playing out before him. Watching him, I was struck by a sudden awareness of how tightly I often clench my grip on life's unfolding, unwilling to let events drift and dissolve in their natural cadence. My mind shifted, pondering how much energy I wasted resisting the ephemeral nature of moments. This boy seemed to embody an instinctive acceptance of life's constant evolution, a willingness to engage even when outcomes are fleeting and uncertain. It reminded me that resisting change can be like gripping sand. The harder we try, the more it slips through our fingers. His innocent freedom was a lesson I had long needed but rarely heeded. The contrast between his light-hearted pursuit and my usual cautious pacing was stark. I recognized in myself a pattern of anticipating disaster during transitions, a rehearsed pessimism I'd crafted to shield against possible disappointment. Yet, paradoxically, this self-imposed armor often left me paralyzed, sterile in creativity, and isolated from meaningful experiences. The bubble chase became a metaphor for my own hesitation, too afraid to reach, to risk, to trust. Later that day, enticed by that new perspective, I attempted something I still hesitate to do: spontaneous movement without plans. I joined an impromptu drumming circle forming in a park nearby. At first, uncertainty prickled beneath my skin as unfamiliar rhythms pulsed through the air. But as I let my hands find the beat without judgment or expectation, an unexpected exhilaration expanded inside me. For a precious stretch of time, I abandoned predictions and scripts. The raw, unstructured connection to sound, and others melted a few of the rigid fears I didn't know I carried. That night, lying awake, I revisited the sensation of stepping into such fluidity and questioned why everyday living so often excludes these moments of open-hearted surrender. It seemed I had constructed invisible barriers that prioritized control over presence, planning over play. An honest truth began to crystallize. Vulnerability isn't a weakness, but a portal to deeper aliveness. The following week, during a rainstorm, I stood watching droplets cascade in chaotic patterns against a window pane. I marveled at how nature exemplifies unpredictability, yet sustains balance effortlessly. Rain doesn't painstakingly orchestrate every drop's journey. It surrenders to gravity and winds, confident in the system's dance. I envied that trust. It shifted something inside me, unveiling how much mental effort I spend trying to choreograph moments meant to unfold freely. This intuition led me to try resisting compulsive what-if scenarios when solitude enveloped me late at night. Instead of mentally mapping worst cases, I invited curiosity for what emotions arose. Some nights, it was restlessness. Others, quiet sadness or flickers of joy. Allowing space instead of pushing away gradually softened inner tension. There was a tenderness in observing my feelings without immediately labeling or mitigating them. This gentle attention opened a door to self-compassion I hadn't fully embraced before. During one poignant conversation with a colleague, she shared how embracing uncertainty at work transformed her professional relationships. Letting go of the notion that every outcome must be predictable allowed her to listen more deeply, adapt fluidly, and innovate freely. Hearing her story planted a desire in me to translate that lesson beyond our jobs into everyday encounters with friends and family. One evening, at a family dinner, when plans unexpectedly shifted due to a delayed guest, instead of frustration, I consciously chose patience and openness. The unscripted extension created room for different stories to surface and new jokes to bloom. I noticed how relinquishing rigid schedules didn't unravel the evening, but enriched it. This real-time exercise confirmed that flexibility can nurture connection rather than threaten order. Now, picture your own life's moments that off-balance you: a sudden change of plans, an ambiguous conversation, a dream postponed. What if you embraced the flow instead of tightening your fists? Imagine your thoughts as ripples on a pond, some unpredictable, some lingering longer, each part of a greater harmony you don't need to control completely. In coming days, I plan to choose presence over resistance, to play like that child chasing bubbles, to drum without worry about perfect rhythm, and to watch raindrops without demanding their pattern. Perhaps through these humble acts, the restless charge of over-control may begin to dissolve, replaced by a steady pulse of acceptance and openness ripe with possibility. There are evenings when the air carries a peculiar stillness, almost as if the world holds its breath. During such times, I sit quietly, allowing the weight of everything I've wandered through to settle beneath the surface. A subtle shift takes place, a weaving together of threads woven through countless layers of thought and feeling, each gently nudging me toward a deeper understanding that transcends simple explanation. It's not a conclusion yet, but a space pregnant with possibility, where everything begins to align in surprising harmony. As I reflect inward, I notice how the currents that once pulled me in disparate directions now ripple in concert, a silent symphony unfolding beneath the noise. There is a curious grace in witnessing the complexity of inner struggles dance alongside flashes of newfound clarity. It's as if the internal landscape has transformed into a vast, shifting ocean, chaotic waves crashing against rocky cliffs, yet also quiet coves that catch sunlight in unexpected places. Navigating this terrain requires not just endurance, but a gentle patience, a willingness to embrace the full texture of the journey without rushing to anchor in certainty. I remember a conversation with an old friend during a dusk walk, the sky alight with fading hues. We spoke of the invisible forces shaping our paths, those subtle, almost imperceptible patterns of thought that seem to orchestrate both stumbles and strides. Sometimes, she said softly, you don't need to forge new roads. Sometimes you just need to see the existing ones with fresh eyes. That idea resonated deeply, reminding me that transformation often unfolds quietly at the edges, in moments of subtle recognition rather than grand declarations. It encouraged me to pause, to feel beneath the surface, and honor the slow unraveling of what had long remained tangled and obscure. There is a peculiar alchemy in how the tension that once seemed stifling and unyielding begins to loosen, not through force, but through an invitation to coexist with discomfort. Like a night sky studded with stars, where darkness doesn't erase light, but provides contrast to reveal its brilliance. The complexities I've wrestled with become context for something richer to emerge. This interplay between resistance and surrender, between control and flow, has revealed itself to be less of a battle and more of a delicate dance, sometimes tender, sometimes wild. In this dance, I discover the strange sweetness of vulnerability, not as a weakness, but as a portal to profound depth. It invites me to meet uncertainties without flinching, not because they diminish my strength, but because doing so expands it. I sense that there lies a power in landing softly within moments of unease, as though touching the thin skin between chaos and calm, and finding footing there. It turns out that the edges I feared crossing were thresholds to broader horizons, gateways to a richer relationship with myself and life. There are times when I catch myself holding my breath, expecting that surrender will spell loss or collapse, only to witness instead an unexpected unfolding, a breath released, a weight lifted, a space opening where only tension had existed before. This paradoxical sense of gaining freedom through relinquishing control feels less like a destination and more like an ongoing rhythm, a pulse woven through the fabric of experience. It isn't a tidy epiphany, but a living invitation to reimagine how presence can emerge amid flux. What becomes clear through this unfolding is that the paths we take inward echo outward, touching the contours of how we move through the world. Our inner dialogues craft the lens through which reality is seen, coloring moments with hues ranging from shadowed fear to luminous possibility. Recognizing this interconnectedness summons both humility and courage. Humility to sit with imperfections unflinchingly, courage to continue stepping forward even when clarity remains elusive. Walking beside a slow-moving river yesterday, I watched how the water curved smoothly around obstacles, at times pooling deeply, at others rushing with renewed vigor. That river didn't resist stones nor fast currents. Instead, it adapted, found new courses, and kept moving with an openness that felt close to sacred. Like that river, the journey through these internal landscapes requires learning how to bend, how to flow, how to trust the momentum of life itself without collapsing under its unpredictability. Reflecting on everything we've delved into so far, I sense a quiet stirring, a readiness to step beyond contemplation into embodied knowing. It is as if the pieces assembled across this passage are pointing towards something inevitable, yet tenderly cloaked to preserve its mystery a moment longer. This is the threshold where insight meets action, where understanding becomes lived truth, and a new chapter beckons just beyond sight. I invite you to hold this space with me a while longer, the space where threads intertwine, where tension softens into potential, and where the subtle alchemy of our shared voyage glimmers with the promise of emergence. Here, grounded in the depths of what has been explored, we prepare to cross into what will come next, carrying the resonance of everything before us like a song waiting to be sung aloud. As twilight deepened, I sat in quiet contemplation, aware of a subtle shift unfolding within me that had been growing over time. The restlessness that once gnawed insistently at my edges no longer dominated my awareness. Instead, it softened into a companionable rhythm, an invitation to coexist with uncertainty rather than resist it. This wasn't a triumph over anxiety or fear, but a gentle transformation born from countless moments of surrender, observation, and willingness to lean into discomfort without retreat. I remembered a night not long ago when I found myself walking an unfamiliar path with no destination in mind. The sky was draped in a tapestry of stars, vast and mysterious, and I felt a kinship to their steady glow despite their silent distance. In that expansive calm, it struck me how much of life's tension arises not from external chaos, but from the relentless effort to predict, arrange, and secure a future that, by nature, defies full understanding. It became clear that my yearning for control was a vestige of a survival impulse, an echo aiming to guard a fragile sense of safety. But this impulse, intense as it was, had gradually pooled into a well of chronic tension, turning opportunity into obligation, presence into pretense. In those moments, I began to see that embracing unpredictability isn't about surrendering our agency. It's learning to wield it with grace, choosing when to tighten and when to loosen without losing faith in ourselves. I found insight in stories shared by others, whispered over late dinners and fading embers, where courage wasn't measured by absence of fear, but by the courage to keep breathing deeply as fear moved alongside. We discovered strength in shared vulnerability, in acknowledging that life's fractures and patches are where light and growth often nestle. A particularly vivid memory emerged of a twilight conversation with my grandmother, whose hands bore the quiet wisdom of many lived seasons. She spoke softly of her own battles, times when the unknown stretched before her like an endless sea. You cannot hold the horizon, she said, but you can learn to sail its moods. Her metaphor unfolded like a balm, inviting me to trust my own navigation even amid shifting winds. That night, her voice layered with the cadence of resilience became a lantern in the dark, illuminating a path away from futile grasping toward fluid presence. What lingers most strongly as I write now is gratitude for the scenes, the rains, the unexpected detours, the bursts of laughter and vulnerability that revealed how presence blooms from surrender, not struggle. From there, small openings appeared, spaces where the pulse of my heart synchronized with moments, where breath deepened and tension dissolved into appreciation. It became clear that the very act of leaning into discomfort, of welcoming rather than fleeing uncertainty, rewired the nervous system's habitual alarms. It gave rise to a sanctuary no external circumstance could dismantle. I understand now that this shifting dynamic exists not as a one-time victory, but a continual ebb and flow, a living dance requiring kindness toward myself when old patterns flicker back. With that awareness comes a softening that ripples into how I meet others, offering patience to those similarly entrapped by invisible forces, knowing that compassion begins with recognizing shared humanity beneath individual masks. If I could speak to anyone who carries the weight of silent anxiety, I'd say, you are not alone in feeling poised between longing for calm and the edge of resistance. The quiet struggle is real, yet within it lies a doorway. I invite you to cultivate curiosity toward your internal landscape and trace the subtle scripts that urge you to stay alert when peace beckons. From that place of waking consciousness, the possibility to rewrite your relationship with what arises unfolds. Ultimately, our journeys ask us to become explorers of uncertainty, navigators who steer not by rigid plans, but by an awakened intuition that pulses beneath the surface. The courage to remain present with uncharted feelings becomes our compass, and love for the self, imperfect, evolving, fragile, guides every step. This path is not smooth or swift, but it leads to a freedom that transcends fleeting relief. It offers a profound belonging to life as it truly is, unpredictable, raw, and endlessly graceful. And walking it, I find myself more alive, more whole, and quietly radiant with possibility.